I know, but it's hard to trust that when we look at the history of the women in our family who are alone, and I don't want to be alone. I'm using a selfie stick for the first time. Does that make me cool? Decided to take a hike by myself today. It feels so good to be alone out here in the woods. I've been successfully aloning now for 8 months. Aloning for me was the intentional and conscientious choice to abstain from relationship and sex. Something about making the choice to be alone served to alleviate a lot of pain that I have felt in the past in my lack of partnership. Aloning is, in essence, an exploration of myself, but also of love. So by not participating in the search for love with a romantic partner, I've really been able to learn a lot about love. And learning more about myself, I believe, in the end brings me closer to finding what it is I want. I live in this tiny cabin on a little piece of paradise in Down East Maine. With these two knuckleheads. Hey, Ow! Oh my God, right down. When their dad and I divorced, they were still pretty young. And I've been raising them alone now for 7 years. Living together in our very small space is challenging. made all the more so when one of us is having a bad day or when I'm going through something big. I think loving well through action is hard, and that is maybe best exemplified by parenting and by really learning how to take care of yourself. So when you're trying to do those two things simultaneously, it's extremely challenging. Our lifestyle means that although I am choosing to be alone, I'm rarely alone, which is a struggle sometimes, but ultimately has made this process more productive. Parenting these two has really exposed some of my greatest handicaps when it comes to loving. You know, when I'm at my worst with them, I am impatient, spiteful, volatile, reactionary, and selfish. And these are all things that tend to show up in our loving romantic relationships. But kids, it's just that much more important to get it right. I mean, we are teaching them how to love. So this process is for them too. And I'm so grateful to them for so many reasons. Among them, for being part of the impetus for this process. Let's work on ones that we have a clue on, like what's 21 down?
No, we need to get to...
No, this is the way you do crosswords. So like, you fill in the ones that you can get, and then that will give you a clue as to what letters are in this one. That's how you do it. So 21 down.
And cover with words that inundate.
Is that an M?
Yeah, no, that's an N.
In...
Admonish, inundate.
Oh, an N. Inundate. Inun. Yeah.
I know.
Okay. What's this one? 20. Was it 28 down?
Yes, it's most important chief, which is
I wonder if clementine actually is just like a different species of orange. Or am I saying species right?
Missing species of orange?
No, am I saying species like, is that like?
Species.
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 That sounds weird when you say it.
I know.
I say species.
Oh! Fuck the bubble.
I was in what I guess you could call a friends with benefits relationship for about the span of 2 years, off and on. That relationship was confusing and confounding and lovely and excruciatingly painful and destructive at times. And it was all I wanted. I was so in love with this man. He was only so available. He would invite me in, and then he would shut me out, and I was completely paralyzed in between those two forces. And rather than say to myself, this man, this beautiful man that you love so much, just can't give you what you need. He just can't give you what you deserve. This is so sad, and it's time to say goodbye. I internalized on a very deep level that this was about me, that something in me must be lacking. There were a few others after him, all of whom ended up being unavailable in some way. And still not healed from my relationship with him and reeling from the string of disappointments that came after. I was in a point of personal crisis. I just knew that I didn't have it in me. I could no longer continue the way that I'd been going. I could no longer continue with this destructive pattern. I had lost the ability to be able to trust my decisions and to trust my feelings for men. And, it wasn't just me going through all this. My children, by no choice of their own, are tuned to my frequency. I was juggling being a full-time student, a single mother, working sometimes 3 jobs during the summer. And the relationships ended up taking so much of my precious time and my precious energy away from my kids, my school, myself. It just had to stop. I had to take a step back and take myself out of the game. During my aloning, I started to think a lot about the first significant male relationship that I had, which was with my father. My father was absent pretty much all of my childhood. I would see him on an average of once a year. As a little girl, I remember yearning to see him and wanting so badly for him to call or to visit. And I remember the disappointment when he would say he was going to call, or he would say he was going to visit, and he wouldn't call and he wouldn't show up. And it was devastating for me. I mean, when he did show up, I was the center of his universe. There was no question that he loved me, but alcoholism prevented him from being reliable. And I started to realize that space, that yearning, that pain that I would feel within these partnerships that I would pursue with unavailable men, that space was familiar to me. And so, although it was painful, it was comfortable, it was familiar. I knew it quite well. When it started to dawn on me that these relationships with men that I were picking really mirrored my relationship with my father, it was so sad, I mean, it was a lot easier to believe that I just had the bad luck of the draw. That coincidentally, these men just would orbit around me. I think maybe also in my relationships with these men, I was trying to change the history with my father. if this guy comes around, if this guy decides to stay, if this guy picks me, then maybe somehow it would make up for, or it would heal my history with my father. Sometimes I wonder if I'm not just scared to really love. Maybe my picking unavailable partners is a brilliant defense mechanism, keeping me from really being in and really doing love. And I guess all of these things could be true. So I just totally lost it and screamed at the kids. Most of the time I don't, relative to the amount of times that I want to, but days like today, I just have so many pressures on me right now, and my computer isn't working, my camera isn't working, I'm trying to make this film, I'm trying to apply for jobs, which means I have to write all these cover letters. I mean, it's just like there's not enough hours in the day, and never mind cleaning the house and shopping for groceries every other day and planning meals, and I'm totally exhausted, and yeah, so I buy an expensive organic chicken to cook for tonight, thinking, I'm going to feed us this great meal, and then I take the kids to the bakery on the way home, and all they can do is fight over the fact that I said Ariana couldn't have dessert for the rest of the week, which I don't even remember saying, but of course Everett remembers, and now he's like yelling at me, and then we get home, and Everett, I told him yesterday we could have a chore-free day because I had a really hard day yesterday and I just wanted to relax with together. And so Everett today is like, well, I'm not going to do the dishes because those dishes are from yesterday. And he just wouldn't budge, and I just lost it. And I screamed at him. And then I just get really depressed and just got in the car and drove to the end of the driveway and turned around. It's just a lot. It's a lot all the time. All the time. It just doesn't really ease up. I always tell myself when I slip like this, I'm going to go home and I'm going to have a talk with the kids and tell them, that I'm working hard not to yell. And I tell myself it's good lessons. It's a good lesson in being human. You try. Sometimes you fail. You own up to your actions. And you keep trying. And I think today's aloning is about holding myself accountable and turning around at the end of the driveway instead of just going. What?
What are we having for dinner?
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Peepers are so loud.
Yeah.
I started to worry how I was going to end this film, how I'm going to neatly tie things up, and what final messages I'm going to give, or what am I going to say about aloning in the end. I mean, aloning has meant many different things at different times, and it has provided countless insights along the way, and I expect it will continue to. I don't know how much longer I'm going to choose to be alone, and there doesn't have to be an answer to that, I suppose. I think it's an open-ended process. I do know that I feel a lot differently about being alone. When I used to unpack my sadness around being alone, there were things in there that you would expect to find. The desire to share parts of my life with somebody, the desire to share my bed and body at night, the desire to be held at the end of a difficult day. It would be nice to have someone to pick out a record while I'm cooking dinner, someone to laugh with. But there were other things in there too, like this unwarranted shame. I got to thinking a lot about that. Where does that shame come from? Why is it shameful to be alone? To me, it used to mean that I was the unpickable one. And of course, the irony is that I would pick men who were unable to pick me, either because we were incompatible or because they weren't wanting or willing to really do relationship. So I no longer feel a slave to that kind of self-judgment. I rather like who I am, and I feel really good about myself. I feel really good about who I am and what I'm doing. That's not to say that it isn't hard sometimes. I would have liked to have had a strong, beautiful partner by my side. I mean, my kids deserve that. And there are days when the longing for physical intimacy is excruciating. I'm 40 years old, and probably I'll have one or several more partners, but maybe not. And I have to ask myself, would that be okay? I come from several generations of women who have ended up alone. My great-grandmother ended up alone. My Nana ended up alone. My mom is alone. And not too long ago, I guess I thought that was a real tragedy that they never found someone to share their lives with in the end. But I'm not so sure I feel that way anymore. There's a great, wide, open freedom that you have when you're alone. And I think maybe one of the mistakes we make when we enter a relationship is that we think we have to narrow the scope of that freedom or give it up altogether. I have been reveling in the great wide open freedom now that I've let go of a lot of the sadness and shame that came along with being unpartnered. I've been doing the things that really make me feel grounded and present in my environment and in my body. Like spending more and more time in the woods, swimming naked, really challenging and stretching my inner creativity, entering deeper waters of communication with those around me, and practicing being humble so that I can really see and hear what others might need of me and how I might be letting them down. I have no idea where this process is going to go, what it's going to look like a year from now, a week from now, and I don't need to know how it turns out. I guess I'll just take it one day at a time. I look at the decades in which I acted out these unhealthy patterns with men, and I can just let it go. That's okay. That's okay. Growth isn't always a linear process, and so it took me a while to get where I am now. And I'm just going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy myself. Love asks so much of us in ways that we're really unprepared for. I think our culture has given us this spoon-fed ideal of what love is and what love looks like and what love feels like. It's really Disney, and it isn't in the end anything that you can hang your hat on for very long. That ideal love is fleeting, and the rest of it is really work. It's real introspective work, and it takes guts, and it takes commitment. And for some people more than others, it takes a certain amount of bravery because we all have different things to confront. I've really only just begun perfecting the art of loving myself. And when the time is right, I'll be happy to share the work of love with somebody else. But until then, I'm perfectly happy holding out.
I want to share your mouthful. I want to do all the things your lungs do so well. I'm gonna bed into you like a cat beds into a female. Turn you inside out and lick you like a crisp packet.
Jesus, there's like 500 ants all of a sudden. You guys. Come. Have a shrimp. Run. Go eat that. Leave me alone.